Alright guys, welcome to another MOTOBOB video. Yesterday I had to change my chain because my old one was quite frankly disgusting. So I thought I'd make this quick overview of how I did it. There's a really good video by Delboy's Garage that explains absolutely everything about it, and it's about an hour long. So if you want extreme detail about how to replace your chain and sprockets, then I'd fully recommend checking that video out. It's really good. But this is my experience of it, and hopefully I can give you a few other tips on the way. So the reason I needed to replace my chain was because I've been riding through winter and I tried so hard to stay on top of it, but for all the times that I cleaned it, re-lubed it, it still picked up salt and that rusted all along the sides of the chain. In total the bike's done about 8,000 miles, so the sprockets are still pretty much fine. So that's why I'm changing the chain only and not the sprockets. A lot of people do both at the same time, and if you do have to change sprockets, I would always do the chain as well, but in the other direction you don't necessarily need to change your sprockets if you want to replace your chain. You can tell if you need to replace sprockets by looking at the teeth, and if they're still squared off on the end, then they're fine. It's when they come to a point that they're too worn. You can also look at the gap between each tooth. If that's symmetrical and round, then it's fine. If it's slanted to one side and slightly oval shaped, then again you know you need to replace your sprockets. So I picked up a DID or DID chain off eBay, and that came with a rivet link, a master link. So that's the link that joins the two ends of the chain, and you have to rivet the ends of it. You can get snap links, which you just clip into place with some pliers, but generally people say that those aren't quite as secure as a rivet link. It's easier to fit, and if you've got a low powered bike, perhaps I'll be tempted to fit one of those, but you know, for bigger bikes, you probably want to do it as safe as possible. But it does mean that you need, as well as a chain breaker to remove the old one, a chain riveting tool to press the ends of the link into place. Now I've already got a chain breaker. This one was my granddad's. He was a motorcycle mechanic, I think, in the army, and until last week or the week before it was tucked away in my dad's garage. So this has been 3 generations in the family, so I was pretty keen to use this, but it looks like it's for quite small gauge chains, so I did give that a go. But also, because I needed to rivet as well, I bought this Sealey breaker and riveter tool. I actually bought this before I watched the Delboy's Garage video, and he has the exact same one and bought it on the exact same logic as me, which was that you can pick it up for about 30 or 35 pounds, even though the full RRP is 70 quid. So it's a bargain. There's lots of cheap ones available out there and lots of really expensive ones, and largely I would say, you know, the more you spend on a tool, the less likely it is to break and the longer it'll last. But you've got to balance that off between how many times I'm going to do this job. So this is quite a rare job to do, to change the chain. So that's why I plumped for this one. It's middle ground. It's not super cheap, especially the RRP, but it's, you know, not too expensive. And Sealey's a known brand as well. If you read all of the reviews on like eBay and Amazon for the really cheap chain breakers, there's one common theme, and that's that the punch snaps. The way you can stop this happening is to grind the end off the pin. So I've got a Dremel copy that I got from Maplin for 25 quid. And again, another bargain because I've used it for quite a few jobs lately. And I'm sure it'll come in handy in future. So what you want to do is get the fiberglass cutting disc and just grind the end of one of the pins off until it's flush against the surface of the plate. That's going to make it super easy to push the pin out. I tried using my granddad's antique army tool, but it didn't quite have the depth to push the pin all the way out, so I had to switch to the Sealey. And all you need to do with this is slot in one of these punches that looks like that, and that goes inside here, and then you just screw it in until it pushes the pin out the back. It should go pretty easily if you've ground the head off, and if you've got a lot of resistance, then you've probably not got it lined up right. So don't try and brute force it out, because that's when you'll snap the punch. So just back it off, line it up again, and try again. Might vary from breaker to breaker, so have a look at the instructions. This one comes with instructions, so check those before you do it and make sure you got the right parts. You should be able to just pull the old chain out through the back. And then I thought I'd take the chance to actually clean the front and rear sprocket. Especially the front one was absolutely disgusting. And you don't want any of that grease and dirt wearing or contaminating the new chain, or just muckying it up quicker than is necessary. So it's a really good chance to get the front cover off the front sprocket and make sure that you get as much of that gunk out as possible. That is actually the skeleton. Now, if your chain slack was adjusted properly before, you're probably going to find that you're going to have to move the wheel forward a little bit, the rear wheel, so that the two ends of the new chain can meet, because chains tend to stretch a little bit. So that means that if your chain tension was adjusted properly, you've had to move it back and back and back as the chain stretches. So move it forward and you'll be able to get the two ends of the chain to meet. On my bike, that means loosening the axle. You've got to remove a little cotter pin first, and then I needed two pretty big wrenches because that's quite tight. You might need a breaker bar as well. Once you've loosened that off a little bit, you just unscrew the adjusters at the back. One of them's a lock nut and then the second one is for adjustment. Again, that's going to vary from bike to bike. Check your manual or Google it or something like that, but essentially you just need to get the front wheel to move forward a little bit. Don't worry about getting it in the right spot right now because you just want to get the chain on. Then you can thread the new chain through and meet the two ends on the back sprocket, and the grease that's on them should hold them in place. Wrapping them around the rear sprocket means that they're a little bit easier to work on because they're not flapping around and moving about. So you should have got a master link with your chain. Get that out of its packaging. You should find a few parts in there. So there's the back plate, which should already have two pins pushed through it. You should have a few O-rings as well, 4 O-rings, a little sachet of grease, and then the front plate. So slot 2 of those O-rings onto the 2 pins and then get loads of grease on there because you don't want that seizing up. So get plenty of grease on. And then once those 2 O-rings are on, or you might get X-rings with certain chains, but essentially that's the same thing. You push that through from the back of the chain. You can then slot the other 2 O-rings onto the front, loads more grease, and then just push the front plate into place. It won't go onto the pins as such, but just rest it in place and perhaps the grease will just hold it there. Now it's time to get serious with the chain tool. You'll need the 2 anvils to press the front plate into place. This is the one that goes on the back of the chain. There's a groove in there just to accommodate the rivets on the back. So that holds on the back. And then this front plate, which has got 2 holes in it, that slots into the tool. And that's going to push the front plate into place, and the 2 pins are going to come through the holes there. Again, check the instructions for your tool if you're not sure. And what you're trying to do here is press that plate into place so that there's just enough of the 2 pins showing that you can actually splay them and hold it in place. You don't want to push this plate all the way on as far as it'll go because it'll squash those rubber rings, and that'll mean that that link will be stiff and it won't move as freely as possible. So just do it a few turns at a time. You just want to push it on slightly, then back the tool off, and then I'll use some calipers to measure the adjacent link and kept just nudging it on a little bit until it's about the same width as that other link. Don't just go in there and do it loads and loads of turns until it's squashed right on. It doesn't need to go that far. You want it to be moving nice and freely. Take your time. I always say, like, if you're doing a job like this and you start getting a bit stressed and a bit frustrated, go make a cup of tea, have a sit down, and then come back to it because you need to be nice and calm and just nudge it on slowly. If you're using a lot of force to get it on, then you're probably doing it wrong. Again, back it off and then just line it up again and try again. Once you've got the front plate in the right spot, you just need to flare out the ends of those pins to hold it in place. And you get a little punch in your toolkit for this. So you get this little anvil here that goes into the back of the tool, and then this punch goes in there, and then you got this press in the back as well. And essentially you just tighten this up until this little pip on the end of the punch fits snugly into the end of the pin. So again, you don't want to be doing loads of turns at once. Just do a few small turns, back it off, and then just see if that end pip just fits in, and you'll see that the rim of the punch there will fit flush against the pin if it's in fully. There's absolutely no need to keep turning and turning because it's not going to go any further. All you're going to do is bend the tool, and that should be pretty much it. Those are the 2 hardest bits: pressing the new plate into place and then flaring out the end of the pin. Like I say, take your time with them, back it off, keep measuring, keep checking, and just do it a little bit at a time. Once you've done that, spin the wheel round so that the link isn't on the sprocket anymore, so that it's loose in the middle of the chain somewhere, and just give it a wiggle to make sure that it's moving freely. You don't want any stiff links because obviously that's going to affect the chain wrapping around the small sprocket especially, and it might make it jump. If it is stiff, you might have to punch it out and order a new master link. Go again and make sure you do it carefully. I think you're better off redoing it than riding with something that, you know, is potentially dangerous. But hopefully it's all good. The last thing you need to do is make sure that your chain slack is set properly, the chain tension. So check the manual for your bike for the spec for the chain slack, but generally you measure it halfway between the two sprockets on the lower part of the chain and just see how far it moves. The spec for mine is 1.2 to 1.4 inches. That's how much it should move up and down. And you can check that with a tape measure if you just stand it up alongside the chain. If it's too slack, you tighten up the little adjuster bolts at the back to pull the wheel back, and that tightens up the chain. Check it again and just keep making small adjustments until it's within an acceptable range of movement. Then you want to tighten up the rear wheel axle, preferably with a torque wrench, and torque it to the spec of your manual and replace that little cotter pin. And that's it, you're done. I'm really happy with the gold chain. I think it looks awesome on the ER6M with all of the other gold parts on that bike. But I've got to say, it's quite a lengthy job and you have to buy specialist tools. Personally, I absolutely love learning how to do stuff, and I think the cost of the tools and stuff and the time spent is well invested in learning something new and learning a new skill. But if you're not particularly mechanically confident and you don't want to spend the money on the tools, I'd say that this is possibly one job that you might want to take your bike to the shop for. It's not that difficult, but as I say, some people just might not want the hassle. And also it's a matter of safety as well. Like if you screw up a chain, then it might snap and that's going to be a bad time for you. Anyway, that's it. I usually film the kind of how-tos and mechanical stuff as I go along, but it was quite a nice day yesterday. Loads of neighbours in and out the door, and it was a nice Sunday. And the motorbike in its own right is enough of a talking point. But when you got the cameras set up as well, people are like, oh, what you doing, making videos? It just gets to the point where it becomes so slow trying to do stuff, set up the camera, chatting to people about what you're doing, then trying to vlog some footage as well. So this is why I've captured some footage from yesterday and then tried to explain it all to you today. Let me know what you think about the format of the video, but also if you've got any questions about replacing your chain, please do leave them in the comments below and I'll try and answer them. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, then click subscribe.